Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this May 1st, Friday morning. We will get started in just a moment, but in the meantime, we'll let you settle in and I'll just go over a couple of pieces of information. If you'd like to leave any questions for today's guest speakers, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. We will be monitoring those and we will address them. As well, if you have any general questions or feedback for the Chamber, please send them to info@windsor-essex-chamber.org. As well, to see all COVID-19 updates and helpful resources, visit our website. We do have a COVID-19 tab open there. We also update our social media every day, so you can see what's coming up and what we have, any alerts or news, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. As well, this webinar will be recorded and made available by the end of the day, but you can see previously recorded YouTube webinars at Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce. So we'll just take another second and we will get started. Okay, I'll hand it off at this time to our Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Rakesh Naidu.
Thanks, Marina, and good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Business Briefs Interactive webinars. And before I go any further, please join me in paying respect to our brave soldiers we lost yesterday. My heart goes to their families. Please to keep them in your prayers. So today we are delighted to have a very special guest with us, Minister Mélanie Joly. She's the Minister for Economic Development and Official Languages. And she'll be joined by our very own Irek Kusmierczyk, that everyone knows, our MP from Windsor-Tecumseh. And Irek's been a great champion for this region. All of you know how hard he works and how well he represents this region. And he's been engaging with us on a daily basis. And he was one of the first ones that came and joined us in the interactive webinars, and his engagement with the business community continues. So Irek, thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and it's good to have you here as well. And Minister Mélanie Joly, many of you know her. She's not a stranger to Windsor-Essex. Her last trip was in February, I believe. It seems years back now, but it was in February of this year, where she came and she announced $7 million worth of investment in 3 of our local companies, which is a great investment. And post that, we had the opportunity to sit down with the minister and have a roundtable at IBLS. And I was joined by several of our partners in the ecosystem. And I was very impressed, not surprised, but very impressed by the minister's understanding and the depth of her understanding of the various sectors, especially the auto industry, the agribusiness industry, and many other sectors that we had spoke and we had a conversation on that day. And in her, we have a very strong ally when it comes to someone who knows the region and also someone who also understands our core sectors of agribusiness and the auto industry. So, we are very delighted that the minister is here with us. And Minister, I'm very well aware of how busy and hectic it has been for you. You've been a very integral part of the federal government's response to the current crisis. And I know that you've been on several calls. I was on a call with you on Tuesday with the Chamber Network, and I think the call ended close to 8 p.m. and you were not done at that time. You had another call to take, and I know, so it's been very long hours for you. You've worked very hard and you've been tireless in terms of supporting and providing, all the benefit and help that is so much needed by the business community. So Minister, before we get into the question and answer, please allow me to formally do an introduction of you. The Honourable Mélanie Joly, you were first elected to represent Cartierville in the House of Commons in 2015. As Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, her mandate includes promoting regional economic development and protecting our 2 official languages. In a previous ministerial role, Minister Joly has worked to promote Canadian culture and to grow and increase the visibility of Canada's tourism sector. She's also worked to safeguard Canada's 2 official languages while promoting the use of French in Canada and around the world, including in the digital sphere. Prior to entering federal politics, Minister Joly founded the WERCC Changement Montreal Party and ran for mayor of Montreal in 2013 under its banner. Minister Joly holds an honors Bachelor of Law from the University de Montreal and Magister Juris in European and Comparative Law from the University of Oxford. She is the author of Changing the Rules of the Game, in which she shares a vision for public policy and civic engagement. She was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. Very impressive indeed, Minister. And Minister, for your information, we've had the opportunity before this call to connect with all our members, the business community, and partners in the ecosystem, such as ECDEV, the tourism, Windsor-Essex, Peely Island, CAM, VTech Alliance, Work for Windsor-Essex, the Port of Windsor, and many different private sector companies, so that we can take input from them and they have the opportunity to ask you the questions. So we have collected all those questions, we've combined them, and we've identified the main questions and main themes, and we have them ready for you. So, Minister, with that, I would like to, open it up by inviting you to provide a few comments. I know it's been very hectic for you. It's unprecedented time. There's a lot of things going on. Things are moving very quickly, and your government is responding back to the crisis in a very admirable manner. I have to commend all of you, the team in Ottawa, and everyone that is doing amazing amount of work in bringing help and respite to many of us. So can you kindly, with everything that's going on and things are changing, new programs are being announced and have been announced. So can you kindly give us a broad overview of what the government has announced till date, and what are some of the support that you have put in place to support the business community in general? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rakesh. It's great to hear you, to see you. I know we've been, meeting each other through virtual networks. Thank you for your work. I think definitely the community can be extremely proud of having you as a leader, and more than ever, the Chamber's role is extremely important as we develop new policy decisions to help people in Windsor-Essex, because definitely we're going through a very difficult time, very anxious times. And so it's great to have you on the line today, and thank you for hosting this. And of course, it's great to see Irek. So I don't think Irek knew that within 6 months, he would be an MP dealing with the impacts of a pandemic, but he's been a strong voice for the region, for his writing obviously, but for the region. And it's great to see you again, Irek. And of course, we'll have the chance to work on many projects, as I'm in charge of FedDev. And FedDev wants to implement more itself in Windsor-Essex. I know Kate Young.
Thank you very much, Minister.
It's a pleasure, Irek. Kate Young, also my parliamentary secretary, is on the line, I know. And so, and so great. It's, I wanted to talk about what's been the different work we've been working on at the federal level, but really go into questions, because I think at this point, a lot of people know the measures and people want to see how they're being implemented. Very quickly, of course, protecting people's health is paramount. It is our priority. And so we follow the expert advice from our public health authorities to make sure that people follow that. We came up with the CRB, the CERB, the $2,000 per month, as people would have, would go through the impacts of sometimes losing their jobs or losing their contracts, and sometimes taking care of children that are at home because school is out, or because they're sick, or taking care of a person that is sick. So we've really had a people first approach, and we've expanded massively the definition of EI, basically. So now it's a $2,000 per month, and this has been rolled out since now beginning of April. Now, afterwards, we came up with an economic package. I think when you look at our reading as a federal government, at the beginning, we saw that it would be much more a movement in demand. So the supply would be there, but demand would be going down for maybe 2 months and then going back upwards. And we need to be there to support liquidities. And so that's why we really work with banks at first to make sure that there would be enough liquidity and that banks would be more flexible. And we work with BDC and EDC, definitely in your neck of the woods. EDC is so fundamental as many businesses export to the US. And bit by bit, Rakesh, because of our phone calls with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, current BT I've worked a lot with, and we changed our approach, and we thought, okay, this is really hitting hard our businesses and we have to go further. And that's why we came up with subsidies. And that's why we passed from a 10% wage subsidy to a 75% wage subsidy. Following that, we also came up with a CEBA account, which is $40,000 loan for small businesses that include a $10,000 forgivable. That becomes basically a $10,000 subsidy, $10,000 subsidy. Then afterwards, we came up also with the support through the BDC and also with rent relief. So the details of the rent relief programs are coming very soon. I know lots of people listening, watching us must be anxious to know them. It will be through the CMHC. It will be rolled out mid-May, but basically that's where we're at this point. We got into an agreement with Ontario, so good news, to make sure that there is 75% costs that are, well, there's a 75% decrease in rent payment, so for businesses. And finally, last point, the RDAs, so the regional development agencies in Southwestern Ontario, it is FedNor. We've received a very important increase in funding. We're nearly doubling the budget of FedNor. I'm coming out with the details next week, but I can answer any questions about that already. So that would be my remarks as to what are the options, the programs. I would add to that we can be extremely proud of how we've dealt with the pandemic here. I think people have been really showing a lot of solidarity, staying at home, making sure that they protect themselves and protect the health of their neighbors. And I would add to that the business community has been showing a lot of economic solidarity because it is important to be confident in the future. A lot of our economy is about, yes, supply and demand, inventories, clients, hard data, but a lot of it is also based on emotions and how consumer feel and what's that trust in the future. And so it starts with us. It starts with people that are defending and being allies of the business sector. And so we're an ally for all the entrepreneurs that are watching us right now. And so now I'm willing to take questions.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks for providing that overview. And you mentioned about the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. So that, you mentioned it will be administered through the RDA. In our case, it will be FedDev Ontario and the Community Futures Organization. So is there anything that you'd like to elaborate on that? Do you have some more information in terms of what will be the volume of funding and what will be its mandate?
So through FedDev, which is the regional development agency for the region, there will be funding two ways. There will be funding through FedDev, but also, and that is mainly more for businesses that are in Windsor, in the city, and just the outskirts. For Essex and for much more the rural parts, it would be through the Community Futures organizations, and I think you have a Community Future organization. So we are nearly doubling the budget of the Community Future organization. They will be providing loans, interest-free loans, or very low interest loans, which is what they do for a living, which is so important for rural communities. So that's for the Community Futures organization. As for FedDev money itself, the idea is to make sure that if a business is not able to have access to money through banks or through the BDC, well, they have another tool in their toolbox now. It is to come to FedDev. We will be there to support sole proprietorships through support, and we will be really offering loans. And the idea is to make sure that basically people that don't have access to the wage subsidy, don't have access to the CBA account, can stop falling through the cracks and come to FedDev. So that's the idea. It is the first time, Rakesh, that FedDev is being used in times of stabilizing the economy. Usually what FedDev does is really economic development, so stimulate demand, support businesses, help them grow. I think it is a first that we are part of that ecosystem that is really showing that we can be there to lend money and to support businesses. There will be a recovery phase eventually, and FedDev will be playing a role in the stimulus package, but that's for later.
Thank you, Minister, and thanks for elaborating on that, because there was quite a few conversations here from our members and concerns for those small businesses, those micro businesses that do not qualify for CBA because the payroll is less than 20K. So I'm glad to hear that there is an opportunity for them to connect with FedDev, and hopefully they will find that they have an avenue to take some support from FedDev. So thanks for elaborating on that. Looking forward to gathering more information on that, because there's many small and medium-sized businesses that have contacted us with this concern.
Yeah.
And same with a lot of tech companies, a lot of tech startup companies, which, as you know, they are the foundation for Canada's economic revival. And in these tech startup companies, many of them are currently playing a role in terms of supporting the various measures that are happening, and also the essential services that are being provided at this time. And many of these tech startups actually need support to survive. So where does tech sector fit in the the initiative with the RDAs and the investment that you're making in the RDA and in the program delivery?
So good news for the tech sector. We really heard them. I had the chance to talk with many of the different CEOs in the tech sector, or angel investors, or head of incubators. So what we've done is we've changed a bit the wage subsidy program to make sure that if a business is new and has been going through high growth, well, we can use January and February of this year as benchmarks to show the 30% loss starting in March. So that's one thing. The other thing also is we announced more money through the IRAP program. So the IRAP program, it was until I think yesterday that people could apply. The idea was to make sure that we would have 1,000 startups that would be supported in the tech sector. That accounts for around 1 million jobs. So, and the announcements will be made by my colleague, Minister Baines, in 2 weeks. So we're going really fast. As for FedDev, we will be supporting non-for-profits through loans, but also subsidies that are helping, so that are incubating many of the tech startups. So that may help then, startups to have access to a bit of funding through a third party, which is the incubator. So that's what we're doing. Is it perfect? I think it's pretty good. I think there's still some tweaks to be done, but it would be great to hear what are the ideas out there.
Thank you, Minister. And Minister, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge MP Kate Young, whom you mentioned is also on. And Kate has been a great supporter of Windsor-Essex as well. And she's called, just like you, Minister, you called a few days back to check on us to make sure everything's fine here. MP Kate Young also did the same. So I really appreciate both of you for taking time to find out how things are in Windsor-Essex and to extend your support. So MP Kate Young, thank you so much for being here with us. And Minister, you know that our region here, we are a very strong manufacturing region, the whole of southwestern Ontario, as you know. Manufacturing is one of our core sectors. It employs over 40,000 people and is a huge contributor to our economy and to our GDP. So for this region, as you can understand, very tightly also integrated in terms of supply chain that goes all the way from the OEMs that we have in this region and the neighboring regions to the supply chain partners that we have all the way from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. For this industry, coordinated efforts and coordinated supply chain is extremely important. As you know, we work in just-in-time manufacturing principles, and you know, a supply chain that is coordinated and works well actually makes this industry tick. With the chaotic opening of economies in terms of timelines, as we are now getting to, to hear from different places, where there will be reopening timelines that will change from region to region, from province to province, and from country to country. It'll become very difficult to actually coordinate the supply chain. And this disruption can actually, put brakes on the revival of the industry and of the region and many other regions. Do you have any thoughts in terms of what can be done to help the auto industry and especially the supply chain disruption? What can be done to eliminate or to reduce the disruption, and what can be done to support the auto sector, not just now, but also in the coming months and years?
Lots of questions, Rakesh. So, okay, so to start with the auto sector and then going into supply chains, well, what we've done is really to make sure that we are working as broadly as possible with our existing measures. That way they can have access to the wage subsidy, for example. And so that's really, really important. We're the G7 country that does the most for businesses and people right now. And we think that's going to help us rebound afterwards. And so as of today, 85,000 businesses applied for the wage subsidy. And that accounts for, we could give you the numbers for the region. I think that would be helpful for Irek to know also. So that's good. And obviously, so the registering started on Monday for the wage subsidy, and the first transfer, so bank transfers, will be done May 7th. So it's going fast. So for the members that are watching us, please go on canada.ca or on your CRA account to make sure you can apply. And definitely that's something we're looking at. What's next? So we started really helping the SMEs first, because they're at the core of our economy, and they were much more, I would say in survival mode than the medium size and really bigger companies. So we're now in a mode of looking at what we're doing for medium size and bigger companies. How we'll, provide them the right liquidities. So there are conversations happening, and I'm in close contact with the Minister of Finance regarding that. So that's the next step we need to go do and I know that there are really important auto sector players in your region that are part of these discussions. So I would put that on the table. The other thing regarding supply chain, so good news, NAFTA, well, the new NAFTA is now in place. So that's helpful for the region. That's helpful for the country. And that provides a lot of, stability. I know that when you're a business person, and I was in business before being in politics, what you're always trying to do is read the situation and mitigate risks. And so you need certainty. You want to know what will influence your decisions. And so I think by having the new NAFTA, we now know that this will help the recovery. And we will be there defending really harshly the importance of international trade, having a world-based, rule-based order as countries are dealing with their borders and reopening their own economy. I think, Rakesh, we're starting economically to go through the most difficult part, which is not the stimulus or not, it's really turning lights on and restarting certain parts of our economy. And we'll see how it goes, but we have to be very cognizant that will be very much more local at first, going to more regional, much more national, and then international. So, and if there are any, issues with supply chains, please let me know. I've been in contact with Drew Dickles, the mayor, 2 times already to make sure that there wouldn't be any issues with the border as well.
Well, that's good to hear, Minister, because as you know, our economies are very tightly integrated, Windsor-Essex and the Greater Detroit, but also Ontario, Michigan, and Canada and US. And this, the trade is very dependent on the movement of goods and people between the borders. So border restrictions do play a huge role and influences the movement and it affects the trade. So can you tell us a bit about that in terms of what is the government doing to monitor the situation, and what is being done and what efforts are being put, as we reopen our economies so that the border restrictions are taken into consideration and we are better coordinated?
Well, we're in close contact with the US and my colleagues within cabinet have been in close contact with them. So as you know, non-essential travel to the US is banned until May 31st. But in Windsor and the Essex region, there are lots of essential travel, and that is going as you're seeing even more than I do. And we know that there's a interdependency between even our public health system in Windsor and the one in in the US. So it is, we know that this is really, Detroit is just on the other side, and just closing the border doesn't make sense, puts even people's health at risk. And so that was something that was highlighted by the mayor when I had a conversation with him at the big, maybe 2 weeks ago. I sit on the COVID-19 cabinet committee, so we have meetings pretty much every day or every 2 days. And we are monitoring the question. But meanwhile, what we've been really, really, really strong at defending is the integrity of our supply chain. And that's why this is extremely important. And we've been having a good collaboration with the Americans.
Thank you, Minister. And Minister, tourism is still part of your portfolio, and I know how passionate you're about tourism. And you, I'm sure, have a great appreciation and understanding of what the current crisis has done to the tourism sector. A lot of small and medium-sized businesses that depend on tourism, the hospitality industry, they've been very severely affected, whether it's restaurants, hotels, motels. The overall, the sector is being significantly impacted. So can you tell us a bit about what the government is doing to support this particular sector?
So I know that the sector has been deeply impacted. I know that it was the first sector impacted, even when you look nationally, because of the Chinese tourism going down. And I really think it was the canary in the coal mine. And I think it would be one of the last sectors to be able to recover. So I had really good conversations with many of the tourism leaders, and we're working on solutions. I was on a phone call a week ago on last Friday with the ministers of the G20 Ministers of Tourism. I'll give you some numbers. I don't think they're public. At this point, internationally, the tourism sector is down 45%. And we think at the end of this summer, it will be down by 70%. So it's a reality. What we're trying to do right now is make sure that the existing measures are being applied to the tourism operators and restaurateurs and many of the players in the sector. The rent relief will definitely help them. We know that the wage subsidy may continue for certain seasonal businesses, we're not discarding that scenario. But I'm still in conversations with my colleagues about that. And definitely, if there are really issues right now for liquidity for some of the tourism operators in the Windsor-Essex region, please go to FedDev, because this will be top of mind also for the agency.
Thank you, Minister. And as we identify and prioritize different sectors, I think we should keep in mind those sectors and subsectors that are very seasonal, that depend on spring and summer season for the business. So hopefully they can get the support first, and they can be prioritized in terms of reopening the economy as well. And Minister, I was also having conversation with our MP Brian Massey, who mentioned that you were sharing some good ideas in terms of what can be done to support local tourism as well, and maybe shift some attention from international tourism focus to local. Can you share a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so Brian is always there to ask me tough questions. I was in the I did my parliamentary committee appearance 2 days ago. And he wanted to know how could we support more local tourism. I know this is something that is dear to Irek's heart as well. And so what we're looking at is that there's a federal agency that is called Destination Canada. Usually this agency is really to promote Canada's tourism brand to the world. At this point, it's not as if we're going to do that already. So we're trying to see, even before doing national campaigns, because we're not even at that point yet, how can we partner with much more local tourism agencies to support, as we will help, local tourism, eventually regional tourism, eventually national tourism and international tourism. And this is not only Canada, this is all the G20 countries that are doing that, because obviously there's no vaccine and we have to control the spread of the virus, and I would say defend the integrity of many of the region's public health systems that are sometimes a bit more, how can I say, have less capacity than in some city centers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Minister. And Minister, you rightly pointed out that our focus all along in the last few weeks has been, how do we really contain the issue? What measures can we do to provide relief in the in the current situation? But equally important, maybe more important now, is to move forward with reopening the economy and focusing on the recovery phase. And I think that's where there's going to be a lot of support that will be needed by businesses, and also some concerns, and that's got to do with how can we open the economy, and what safety health measures needs to be put in place, and the importance of having adequate supply of PPEs so that we can ensure that employees have the confidence to go back to work and they're safe. We in this region have developed a task force that is headed by the Economic Development Corporation. A lot of other agencies are part of that. And we have very engaged conversation in terms of different sectors, what support they need, and what measures need to be put in place so that we can get back to reopening the economy. As part of that, CAM, which is the Canadian Association of Mole Makers, they have a weekly survey that they send out to their members. And in the most recent survey that was sent out, about 42% of the respondents had a concern related to PPEs and the maybe not having enough PPEs in place, which can affect getting the industry to reopen because of employees being concerned about going back to work. So can you talk a bit about what is being done to ensure that we have adequate amount of PPEs in place so that we can bring people back to work? Yeah.
Okay. So, and I had good conversations with John as a party throughout. We've been texting and I know he's part of the new supply chain that is being developed to produce PPE. And so, first and foremost, the federal government we played a role in terms of buying equipment, but that was usually for our Canadian Armed Forces, for, there would be like the national stockpile, but it is usually really much more Ontario and provinces that would be in charge of doing that. And what the pandemic has taught us is that we, there was a role for the federal government to really help and try to not only buy these products from China and the US and Germany in particular, but also create our own capacity. And so I think regarding the PPE access, we're still making everyday bulk purchases around the globe to make sure that we have the right PPE. We've been actively working with Ontario on that, but we know that there more needs to be done. Now, 6 weeks ago, based on the fact that we saw that that was really a problem, we decided to create our own supply chain in Canada and help retooling businesses that were not necessarily really in the business of doing PPE. And definitely this is something we'll have to look at following the pandemic, because we need to make sure that we have a form of, sovereignty in like that we can make sure that we can have access to our own protective equipment to keep Canadians healthy and safe. So what we're seeing, Rakesh, to your question, is really this is ramping up. So it took 2-3 weeks for business to retool. The other thing also is that there was a lack of textile. So the raw material was not all there. So it wasn't an issue of IP. It was not even an issue of funding the retooling. We were doing that. It was really making sure that, we're putting a New Brunswick company that is specializing in a specific textile that is usually not used for medical equipment, but in construction, and put them in contact with the right companies in Ontario and Quebec. And so that's what we did. So what we were seeing now is that really we're coming up at thousands of PPE equipment being produced per week in Canada. So that's why it's coming up, and definitely the molders and all the association members will be able to have access to it. But that's why we need to bear that in mind while we're reopening the economy, because we can't reopen and then there's the spread of a virus again. And Rakesh, this would be really, really hurtful to our economy if we would have to go back in lockdown. So
if I can chime in, Rakesh, for one quick second, the minister is absolutely correct. The government has put an order for about 290 face masks and about 130 N95 masks, as well as about 900 million gowns. But here's a really good local news story. Windsor Mold Group just recently signed a contract with the Government of Canada to produce about 3 million face masks or face shields for frontline healthcare workers. And so that's a perfect example of how local manufacturers, it's a success story. Local manufacturers are retooling, partnering with the Government of Canada to protect our frontline healthcare workers. It's a really great story. And again, congratulations to Windsor Mold Group on that.
Great. Thanks for that information. And Minister, I think you in your response, you mentioned about a lot of good points, but the ones that I would like to just dive in a little bit more is ensuring that we have the internal strength and Canadian companies that have the capabilities to produce our own PPEs, and we develop the capability in the supply chain to support that. I think one thing related with that is also ensuring movement of goods between provincial borders, and that's something which has been asked by some of our members in terms of what are we doing to remove the barriers, because that is also preventing access to PPEs, especially if there are provinces that have and those that need them. So anything that we can do as we move forward to reduce interprovincial barriers to trade will further help us in getting the economy back on track. Just a comment.
So, sometimes in times of crisis, there are opportunities, and we really hope that making sure that there's less barriers between provinces is an opportunity that we all seize together. Good news is that Prime Minister and Premiers are talking to each other now every week. So that's really, really helpful. There's never been so much cooperation, and they all agree on the importance of protecting supply chains more than ever. Mm-hmm. In agriculture, for example, for PPE, manufacturing, so they agree. So will they have less protectionist reactions? I hope so, because quite frankly, sometimes we have less taxes or duties or red tape between Europe or the US than between our provinces and territories. So it will be, I hope, something that as a government we'll be able to work on. But more we can have the support of the business community, Rakesh, to do just that, better it will be. And better our work will be facilitated for sure.
Agreed, Minister. I'm sure the business community is there, willing and ready to step up to whatever that needs to be done to support our region, our country. Minister, there's few questions. I know we're running out of time, but I'll take just a couple of questions. And I know that you're busy. You have other things to do right after this call, so I'll keep this short and quick. The question is related with cross-border movement of people. We talked about that. I think so in this region we have close to about 7,000 people that cross the border on a daily basis. Many of them are healthcare workers, and they are continuing to cross the border. But many of them are also engineers and technicians and so on. And as the economies open up on both sides, many of these engineers and technicians will need to cross the border, and hence it'll be critical to allow them to cross the border when the time is right. So there is a suggestion and also a request that we consider allowing engineers and technicians to cross the border as well. So please take that as an input.
It is well noted, and I'm convinced Irek will also defend that point.
Thank you, Minister. Let me quickly glance through and see what other questions we have. And there are a lot of questions. We may not be able to get to all of them, but I thank everyone for providing these questions. And Minister, if it's okay with you, we'll take these questions and relate to your team and also to Eric's team so that we can get a response back from you. I think one more question is got to do with tourism. I know it's very close to your heart. And this is about, what about those companies, those operators that want to pivot from, the conventional tourism to maybe health-focused tourism? Can there be any support that can be provided to them? Can there be any incentive? And is Destination Canada an agency where they can seek some help for that?
So I would say first have a conversation with your bank. If the bank is not open, obviously come to FedDev. And I think that's where the conversation can happen. Destination Canada is really a marketing organization. And they're the ones that will support promoting or doing studies. They're really providing really good data to different tourism organizations across the country right now free of charge. So that's helpful. We're following what other countries are doing as well. But for frontline, I would say help, FedDev will be there.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And Minister, again, as I mentioned, quite a few other questions, but we'll relate back to you soon. But at this moment, I would like to turn it back to you, and if you'd like to provide some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Rakesh. Thank you for your leadership again. It's great to see you again. Folks, I think this is it would be great to do this again as we're looking at how we're reopening the economy, how can people continue to invest, what are the issues. There's like Irek and I and Kate who's on the line. There's no playbook for this. We never thought we would be dealing with a pandemic, but we're trying. We're not perfect. This is an imperfect situation. So we go ahead with measures and then we tweak them as we are getting feedback like we're getting right now. And I hear you regarding the tourism sector. I think we have to move on it, but that's why it's useful. So if we could do that in a couple of weeks again, I think that would be helpful. Rakesh, obviously, if the chamber also needs help or whatsoever, we want to support our economic development and chambers of commerce corporations because more than ever, like I was saying, you guys are important. More you're organized, more you can organize the interest of your members, better job we can do. We know that there's a pandemic to be dealing with, but there's an economic crisis. And so we have to bounce back, and we need your help. So thank you all for being there this morning. I hope that you can enjoy the weather a bit while physically distancing and enjoy the weekend. So thank you.
Minister, thank you so much for taking time and for providing a lot of clarification and elaborating a lot of these issues, which are very important and of concern to our businesses. Irek, thank you so much also for joining us and for continuing to be such a great asset for this region. Minister, I know how busy you are, but you've taken the time to dive into many of these issues that have been brought up by our members. So I thank you for that. Thank you for always being accessible and for being connected with us. I've had the opportunity to connect with you one-on-one or phone calls and in different forums, different chats. And every time I hear from you, you are always very well informed and you are always very sincere in terms of offering support. So I thank you for everything that you're doing, and I thank your whole team for the commendable work that is being done. Of course, more needs to be done, and of course, more help is required in the recovery phase. So we look forward to working with you closely as we bring our economy and country back. Thanks once again. Have a great day.
Take good care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Irek.
See you, Minister. Yeah, see you, Mel.